Good morning, everybody. Betting for breakfast, powered by the Sharp app. The final Saturday before we're talking about games. I'm Mark Drumheller here with Dave Gleckner. And Dave, it's been a long offseason since, the Georgia Bulldogs won the national championship. And now we are back here, 1 week before week 0. We've been talking win totals to death. We've been talking futures, Heisman candidates. Everyone's had all summer to kind of figure out some long shot plays that they can win. Next week, we get into the games. And I can't wait, Dave. I'm so excited about these games in this season with the transfer portal. There's just so much change in college football, and I think that makes it a lot of fun for the fans. But, this week we're going to finish things off. A little Big 12 talk, a little SEC talk, and then it's game day next week, my friend.
It is. I can't wait. It's weird. It's that close, and it just feels calm. And that might be a little bit of what we'll get into today. The teams that are expected to make the playoffs, and it just seems like there's a little bit of a sense of normality. Next year is going to be the chaotic year as we see Oklahoma, Texas go to the SEC and all the other unique moves like UCLA over to the Big Ten with USC. So I think it just feels weirdly calm right now because college has been so crazy, but it's going to go nuts starting next week.
Yeah, all the player movement has settled. Now it's, you have some quarterback camps, quarterback battles in camps, and, we're kind of seeing these rosters take shape, which is, very exciting as we head into the season. And, you hit the nail on the head, Dave. Like, change is the only constant now in college football. Yeah. Every year it's going to seem a little bit different. You know what I mean? Like this year with all the player movement, the quarterbacks, the coaches movement, it was kind of like we saw it all kind of trickle down from the big programs to some of the smaller programs, people getting poached, teams trying to fill in the gaps. And next year it's going to be even stranger with all the people moving conferences, Houston going to the Big 12, right? I think that's going to be a lot of fun, exciting. But I want to get into the Big 12 first. I think that is kind of the more dynamic conference in the sense that I think there are a lot of teams that are alive in the Big 12. I think that, there are a lot of teams that got better in that conference. And then we're going to talk about the SEC, as we wrap up the show a little bit, just to kind of give our thoughts. But SEC, obviously the premier conference in college football, but the Big 12 with Lincoln Riley heading to USC. And then, of course, Baylor's success last year under David Aranda. And then Oklahoma State had a huge year. So many teams in the Big 12. How do you see things shaking out?
Yeah, it's funny. You look at the Power 5 conferences, and this and the Pac-12 probably have the most volatility. We know what we're getting out of the Big 10. We know what we're getting out of the SEC. ACC's got a little bit, but they still, I think, have, are pretty top-heavy, let's say.
Yep.
But then you roll into these two conferences, and you really got a chance for a surprise. Now, that's surprising, and I use that word twice in a row for a reason, because 6 years in a row going into the 2021 season, Oklahoma won the Big 12. So it wasn't that much volatility back then. Stoops wins 2 in a row. He hands it off to Lincoln Riley. He wins the first 4 in his career there. Now, last year brought that, sudden change, and we saw no Oklahoma, no Texas. We actually saw Baylor and Oklahoma State in a drag out, knock it out. I think it was like 21-16 championship game that ended near the goal line. So it was, I think, a lot of, starting to see the transition as Oklahoma and Texas move out. And I think we're going to have a similar season there again this year. Obviously, it starts with Oklahoma. I think, we talked to Oklahoma about 3 weeks ago, and maybe my opinion's changed a little bit on them since then. I was kind of leaning under. Now I'm kind of maybe even leaning over now as I started to look at the schedule and the changes. But I still think they have a lot of teams behind them that are chomping at the bit. I know you like Oklahoma too.
I do, absolutely. And, before we get into those teams, though, I think we have to talk about Texas. Like, when you talk about the Big 12, it's really Texas has been in the forefront of the news. They do Quinn Ewers does win the job, so he is named the starting quarterback. Sark names him the quarterback. They suffered some big injuries. Big injury on the offensive line. The wide receiver, Isaiah Nair, he's out. So they've taken kind of, after a offseason, I want to say, filled with headlines. They've gotten some kind of bad news, but now they're going to move forward with Ewers. How do you see in just in the landscape of Big 12, like, every year the joke is Texas back? Like, oh, is Texas? And I'm not so sure they're back.
I'm not either. Look, you know the
I think
story
it's
about
going to take another year. Like,
yeah, and you know the story about Quinn Ewers. Like he is a kind of hometown kid. He's from Texas, right? But
yep.
he didn't go there because there were some issues with the NIL. He couldn't get paid in the state of Texas, so he runs over Ohio State, and well, we all see what's happening there right now. And he jumps back, and now he won the. Yeah, you're right. He won the job the other day. I think that's going to give them a little bit of momentum, and it's going to give them some juice, right? But I'm with you. This is a 5-7 team. This is a team that was 99th in defensive scoring, 101st in defensive efficiency. That just doesn't change on a switch. I think teams like K-State have gotten better. I think TCU's tougher. I do think West Virginia's better. West Virginia brought in JT Daniels. I'm just looking at teams that have gotten better on offense. And now you're asking a team that was that bad on defense to try and improve that drastically to account for what these other teams have done. I think it's a large leap for Texas. I'm with you. I just can't see them getting all the way to the top.
There's just a lot of tough teams, man, in this conference. Yeah. So let's start with that. We'll start at the top with Oklahoma. Oklahoma is a team that I like. I think they're going to come out of the conference this year. I think that them getting Brett Venables is going to improve the defense. Even if they don't have the talent that he's used to working with, that defense has been kind of like the Sooners' Achilles heel year after year. And I think that he is going to have an impact there. It is going to show. And I think offensively, like, I love the combination of Dylan Gabriel and Levy. Like, I think getting him over there in that, as long as he can stay healthy, I think the offense is going to be just as explosive. I'm not going to say that they're going to be just as good as they were with Lincoln Riley, but they still have, Mims back. They still have some playmakers on offense. They have a ton of talent. So I don't think they really take a step back. I think that they can come in, after last year, it was kind of like, a little bit of a down year. I think they can kind of step up and, really, win the conference. And I think that they're, probably out of all the teams in the conference, I think that they probably have, a pretty easy path to getting there when you look at their schedule.
Yeah, it'll start early with them. They do have a game in Nebraska, second week of the season. I know we all laugh about Scott Frost in Nebraska, but
come on, man. Did you see the tweet?
No.
He's out there bragging because he's got the guys throwing up 15, 20 times a game. And he's like, oh, a day in practice. And he's like, oh, it's not that they're out of shape. We're just working them that hard. I don't have the exact tweet, but that's what came out. And I'm like, how fast can I bet Northwestern in week?
I still am with you there. But I see a little bit of a challenge with Oklahoma going to Nebraska. I know Nebraska was, what were they, 3-9? Something like really not good last year. But all their losses,
they were 3-9.
Yeah, all their losses were by less than 9 points. I think it is somewhat of a challenge early on for a guy like Brett Venables, his first head coaching job, to really take a team to a big program on the road. So I'm going to know a lot about Oklahoma coming out of that game. I think it'll be a trap is hard to say in the second week, but I really do think that's going to be a tough situation for them. I don't see them losing. Don't get me wrong there, but I want to see how they kind of look in that game, where their fight is, and how organized they are. But outside of that, I'm with you. Road games in the conference, not that hard. TCU, Iowa State, Texas Tech. WVU could get a little tricky, but again, I think they should win there. And then their toughest tests are at home, right? K-State, I think, is pretty good, but then they got Oklahoma State and Baylor, the two teams that made the conference championship last year, both in Oklahoma. And Bedlam is obviously, to me, it's a home game, but this year it's going to be listed as a road game. So a lot of what you're saying, I think, revolves around that schedule, and it's a little easier than we probably first anticipated. I see 10-2. I really do. I think they're going to be solid. I do have some concerns. I don't think Gabriel is great, but I think he's good enough. Listen, Lincoln Riley was great, but let's not forget he had Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, and Jalen Hurts. That's pretty good. 4 or 5 years, he had some players.
Yeah, and then when he didn't, they failed to meet expectations, right? And that was, the interesting thing last year. Got punched in the mouth by Baylor when it counted. Dave, Baylor is a team that surprised everybody last year. Seeing some, kind of like opposing thoughts in the market. Like some people are really on this Baylor team. Some people think they might take a little bit of a step back because they lost some playmakers on offense. Do you think David Aranda can pull things back together and keep Baylor at the top of the Big 12?
Yes, they're probably my favorite bet outside of Oklahoma to win this conference. You can get them plus 650 in DraftKings today. You know, the market floats a little bit. It's seen at 600, but 650 seems great to win the conference. All they got to do is get that title game. Don't forget, in the Big 12, you're really battling like 3 or 4 other teams to get that title game against Oklahoma. And then it's a coin flip. And that's what we talked about last week. Get into that title game. Maybe you can hedge a little bit on the other side because you're not going to be plus 650.
Right. At plus 650, you're not going to be a dog like that in that title game if they get there. And plus, you know, offensive line stepped up a lot last year, right? And I think you're going to still see that. They're still kind of built the same, right? The fabric of that team is going to be the same. It's just going to be a matter of, you know, can the quarterback make plays? We saw him get a little bit of action at the end of last year. Probably going to ask him to be just more efficient than explosive, you know, from an offense. But, you know, if he's able to get the job done, I think Baylor will be right in the mix.
Well, I think you hit it on the head. Offensive line only allowed, I think it was 14 sacks all last season. They returned 4 starters to that really great unit. I think it was the eighth least amount of sacks in the nation. So it's a very strong unit. And Blake Shapen impressed the, you know what's out of me last year. I was not a Jerry Bohannon guy. I thought he just couldn't.
Where'd he go? He go to South Florida or something? Didn't he?
I think it was down there. Yeah,
USF.
Aranda, you know, as soon as spring hit, he said, Shapen's my guy, and Bohannon was out that quick. But listen, 72% completion percentage, no interceptions. The guy was sharp. He was efficient, like you said, smart with the ball, and he can also move. But he was quick with it. And that's where Bohannon, I thought, struggled. He was not quick with it. And then when he didn't get it out quick, he ran. And that fed into teams like Oklahoma State that had a good defense. So in the end, I think the move to Shapen makes them better. Losing Tyquan Thornton at receiver is going to be tough. He went to New England in the draft. Running back, I'm not that concerned about because they just had a lot there. And I think, you know, even last year's, starter wasn't even.
The line does the work.
Yeah.
You can find guys to run through holes if you can, carve them out.
But let's talk about the D-line. 44 sacks last season. They returned most of the D-line, including all Big 12 nose tackle, Siaki Ika, big guy in the middle. They're going to be good at stuffing the run again and creating pressure in the backfield. And that, I just think this team has the best team in the trenches, the O-line and D-line. And for that reason, they're going to give teams fits. I like the plus 650. I like them to be playing Oklahoma in the championship game.
Yeah, I could definitely see it. I mean, I could definitely see it. I think some people expect them to fall off just because they're not flashy. Like they don't have like those explosive plays or whatnot. The explosive wide receivers that you see some of the teams in there. Again, them matching up against a team like Texas, I think is interesting because Texas is almost like the opposite, right?
Yeah.
Like they have the flashy players, but do they have like the core? Do they have the defense? Can they beat you in the trenches enough to kind of, win close games? And that's really where the concern is. I love Sark and I love what he's doing at Texas. I think they're a year away. But I think Baylor can get right back in the mix in what's going to be a competitive Big 12. I think there's a lot of good teams that can kind of step up. And so I think when you look at the board from a conference perspective, obviously, Oklahoma, is going to be Oklahoma. Like, I don't think they take a step back, but tons of teams in that mix in the Big 12, just a lot of volatility. Baylor, just a lot of strong teams in there. Oklahoma State was a team last year that kind of stepped up, right? Their defense, they got a lot of national recognition. And then, of course, Knowles goes to Ohio State, right? And, and then we see kind of like the results of, the top teams in the country just kind of poaching and getting what they want. And then the other programs kind of having to deal with that. So we see that with Oklahoma State. They lose their coordinator. They lose a lot of playmakers on defense. I think it's like 6 of their 8 top tacklers. They got beat up in the secondary a little bit. So that defense is not going to be the same for Oklahoma State. And that's a team that I expect to take a step back. Spencer Sanders is not a guy. I mean, listen, he's not a guy that I like to put my money on. You know what I mean? Especially when these games are close. And I think the conference in the whole is going to be very competitive. What are your thoughts on the Cowboys? Can they repeat what they did last year? Are you with me in saying that, they're probably looking for a step back? I think their win total is like 8.5. That's probably a play to the under.
Yeah, I'm with you. See, there's some things about Oklahoma State I like. I like the passion. I like the guts. And that all comes from Gundy. He's out there calling these guys traitors. They shouldn't be allowed to the conference meetings. And these guys being Oklahoma and Texas. He's in the forefront of get them out and let us do our thing. And I love it. I love the guts that this guy has. And the team plays with those kind of guts. The problem is I do think he's a little bit undermanned this year. And I also think Spencer Sanders is pretty bad. I mean, his completion percentage in college football, 62%, not very good. 20 TDs to 12 interceptions, not very good. I know he's a little bit of a wild card. He plays with those guts that I'm getting at again. He slings it. And it's tough.
They were both ways.
Yeah, they were down huge. Yeah, huge against Notre Dame, right? But his guts had them come back. It was just one of those seasons where that things kind of fell right for them, and except for the Big 12 championship game. I just don't see that all coming together this year, even though I do think they're going to be out there trying to do whatever they can to make sure Oklahoma or Texas doesn't win this conference. They're that invested into it. But I just don't think the talent's there for them to have a repeat season. So I'm with you. I lean towards the under. I think they might be fourth in this conference.
Fourth, yeah, definitely. Let's talk about some of the teams that might be a little bit under people's radar in the Big 12. I know you got one lined up. We talked about Nebraska earlier, and, how does that relate to the team that you're targeting?
I really like the Kansas State Wildcats. I think they're headed in the right direction. They did get a transfer from Nebraska. I thought this guy had 8 years eligibility already, but I guess he has 9. Adrian Martinez, the quarterback's going over to the Wildcats for one last hoorah. But, I mean, last year I think some of the limitations that K-State had was at the quarterback position was mainly a running quarterback that didn't really have any ability to throw down the field. At least Martinez has a little bit more of that. And when you have Deuce Vaughn in the backfield, everybody talks about Bijan Robinson, but Vaughn had even a better season than Robinson last season. And for them to be able to get some space out of the box, I think that's just going to do wonders. And then they're bringing Colin Klein. He was a quarterback for them back in 2012 as the offensive coordinator. Bring that homegrown juice into them. I think they're going to get real creative, and I think they're going to be good on offense. This 6.5 wins looks like a juicy over for me. They start the season with South Dakota, Missouri, Tulane. They roll out 3-0 into the Oklahoma game. You're only asking me to get 4 more wins the rest of the season and have that momentum. I like K-State a lot this year. Bowl team, not enough probably to sneak all the way into the championship game, but I could see it easily a 7-8 win season out of K-State.
I love it, man. And, it's going to be, I feel like Adrian Martinez was kind of like the fall guy there in Nebraska, right? They lost a lot of close games, and I think Scott Frost kind of pointed the finger at him. And I'm not saying that he was perfect, like definitely not a perfect quarterback, but I do think that, that offensive system in K-State is going to play to his strengths a lot better. And I think you're going to see him with a lot better season that you've seen him in the past. And, I think K-State's going to be live. They're going to be a team that, a play on team probably in the beginning of the year before the market adjusts. And then, you pick your spots where they can get upsets and really, disrupt, some of the top teams here in the Big 12. So definitely love that play. So K-State, and we like Baylor. What was Baylor's odds? Plus 650? 600 or 650?
Yeah.
Plus 650. Tremendous. Yeah. So, like I said, you only got to get to the title game, and then you got a hedge opportunity there, right? So, when you're taking them at the plus 650, we don't need them to beat, to win the actual crown. We just need them to get to the game. And then if we want to keep the ticket, we keep the ticket. If not, we can hedge and just make some money there. So, awesome stuff there. Let's move on to the SEC, right? That's no better way to wrap things up with our, conference previews than the SEC, the number one premier conference in college football. It's probably going to be their own league soon. It's just, insane how they continue to grow and at the rapid pace. I don't have too much going on in the SEC as far as bets. I took Alabama very early at over 10.5 wins at minus 190. Obviously the market's much different right now, so not much action there. Don't know if I want to play them for 11, although I do see them pretty much running the table this year. I think them and Ohio State are the two teams, and then it's kind of everybody else. But college football is full of surprises, so you never know. But I think, it's Alabama's conference again, but there's some interesting teams. Ole Miss, Texas A&M, I think, are in there. Tennessee is a team. I did put a little bit on their under in the win total. I think people are a lot higher on Tennessee than they should be. That defense is, I think we talked about that in previous episodes. That defense is bad, and they just did not do much to make it better. They're just kind of hoping the homegrown talent steps up there. I don't think that's going to be the case. So when you look at the landscape of the SEC, Dave, what are some of the teams that stick out to you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously up top, you're going to have two teams fighting to get into the playoffs once again. Alabama and Georgia don't play each other, which even bodes well or better for them to face up in the championship game. One of them loses in a tight battle, and you see both get there. It's a very, very high possibility, I'll say. And Alabama bringing back, a lot of their best players, Bryce Young. But more importantly, the one bet I do have, and I decided to invest on, was Will Anderson for Heisman. I just 17.5 sacks last year. I was able to get 21 odds. I think it opened around 30 or 40, but I was able to get in at 20. I'm not sure where it sits today, but a lot of talk. And if that team goes undefeated, I think they'll rally around a defensive player, similar to what we heard back in the day with Woodson and such. So keep an eye on that. I think that's one juicy bet in the SEC. But as you asked about the other teams, it's tricky.
Quick question on the Heisman before we move on to the other teams, right?
Yeah.
So if Will Anderson Jr. does win the Heisman, right? Do they just change it to the Nick Saban Award?
Wow.
Like, it'll be the third year in a row Alabama's won the Heisman. Like, do they just make it the Nick Saban Award? They'll have the quarterback, they'll have the wide receiver, they'll have the defensive end. Like, I think if that happens, that will be, like, amazing. Like, Alabama, like, Saban's got to quit after that, right? You just walk away. You're like,
how can you get someone at all those positions? And, it's tough to win from outside the quarterback position, and you get two of them. So
what's next? Alabama kicker going to win the Heisman?
Yeah. Oh, no, that'll never happen.
The punt god. Did you see the punt god?
Yo, yeah.
82?
Dude. What did he put, 82-yarder? Buffalo, right? He's up from Buffalo.
Yeah. Are you kidding me, dude? He's going to kick it out of the stadium.
Oh, it's the best. I love that. And never realized how important that is, but man, it's pretty darn important.
It makes a difference, man. In the playoffs, like, field position makes a huge difference, especially if you're a team like Buffalo playing in cold weather games or whatnot at the end of the year when it counts. But didn't mean to sidetrack you, brother. But I just, the Heisman stuff, Alabama is just like, it's like, put tickets on those guys, dude. They're always in the mix. Go ahead.
They are. And if you can get, listen, this is one of those years I realize what you have out of Stroud and Young. And for Young, I just think it's so hard to win two in a row. And
back to back.
You're probably like me. I think Ohio State might win every game by 30, and it might skew Stroud's, when you're only playing 2.5 quarters. I'd probably lean on some other guys out there. I mean, he's going to be great. He is. But so that's kind of my perspective of taking someone outside of those two. But looking at the conference, I talked about it. Well, let's just say I do kind of like A&M. I think the Fisher dynamic with Saban is going to be very interesting. That's the toughest game Alabama has on the schedule, but they get it in Tuscaloosa. The addition of Max Johnson, I think, is really going to do them well. Fisher is good at getting the most out of his quarterbacks. Never thought highly of Kellen Mond or some others, and he's able to do it.
He's real good. Like, he's real good thrown to the middle of the field. Like, I think that's the move. I don't think King's the guy there. Like, I think they got to go give it to Johnson this year. I think they're going to be most successful that way.
And what's his brother, the stud tight end or something too?
Mm-hmm. I think so. Yeah, I'm not sure offhand.
I think that's why he went there. That was one of the big moves. But
he smashed them at the end of the year.
He did.
Yeah, he lit them up. Yeah, in that game at the end of the year. Yeah.
Yeah, I like Max Johnson, son of a Florida State quarterback, obviously, Brad Johnson. But, always got to throw in some Florida State in every show. But, and then looking at that division, that side, I still like Kentucky a lot. There's just, there's just a lot that I like about them this year. The coach, the quarterback, the moxie. I think they're being kind of, looked at downwards by Tennessee and some of these other squads. I like Will Levis. So that's a dark horse team. I don't hate Florida. We talked about it last week. That early game against Utah is going to be so crucial to their success. I think
I know.
When I'm looking at teams down in that middle, lower, I'm looking at Kentucky and Florida.
Yeah. It depends. I think Florida, a lot depends on Richardson, right? And we know he's a playmaker, but is he going to be able to really pass when he in high leverage situations? Is he going to develop as a passer enough? Now I know that Napier's going to be, they're going to be much more physical. They're going to run the ball more, but he's still, there's going to be big spots against these tough teams where he's got to make plays with his arm, and it'll be interesting to see kind of go down. Just has he developed as a passer? Enough. But I think I like Florida. I think in that game, I'm back and forth. I don't know.
Yeah.
I would love to get it's just hard. With the market, I think it's still at 2. So it's you're pretty much picking a winner. If you're gonna, you're pretty much picking a winner. If you're gonna take Florida, you just play the money line.
And I talked about that travel and the heat, and you said the same
that's
thing.
The biggest part. Yeah, that's the biggest part to me, especially because where's Utah's weakness, right? It's defense, right? So what's Florida going to do? They're going to pound the shit out of them, right? And they're going to run the ball and in that heat, and it's, it could be a problem. I don't know. I love the offense. I love they get Tavion back. They got Rising back. I love everything they have on offense. They're scoring 1 million points in that game. But will they hold up if Napier's slowing the game down, beating them up? I don't know. It's a tough game. I haven't played it, but
no, I haven't played either, but I do lean Florida, even though I love Utah this year. So it's a tough it's one that I can't wait for.
What do you think about Ole Miss? I worry about them in the beginning of the year. Yeah, I don't think they know. I think it's I think it might be Altmaier. They don't know.
No, that's why I asked.
When you're this late in the season, you don't have a quarterback, man. You don't have a quarterback. That's the issue.
I 100%.
And I believe in Lane, but I don't know, man. This seems a little iffy.
Yeah, and that's why I asked so quickly. Who is it? And I do have some concerns. I know Lane likes to play games, so maybe he's really he has one strong opinion, just doesn't want to let it out. They did have a couple good transfers come in at the running back position too, and wide receiver. I think they're good again.
Yeah. They brought in everybody. I mean, he works the portal like nobody else do. He's, it's a whole new team every year with him.
It is, but they did return 7 starters on defense. Not that it was surprising. The defense wasn't as bad as I thought. They weren't great stopping the run, but it was pretty good. They made some quality key stops when they needed to. They got better. I think Ole Miss is definitely a bowl team. I just don't know if they're.
I'm not going to bet them the first couple weeks. I don't even know their schedule. It's probably soft. It's probably all their non-con games, but I'm still not. I think that there's potential there for them to start real slow.
Yeah, they got Troy, Central Arkansas, and Georgia Tech, and Tulsa. So they're off to, just watch them do their things. But then they got Kentucky, and that's October 1st, and that's going to be fun.
I might bet Troy there. I wonder.
22 and a half.
They got to be getting a ton of points. 22 and a half. That might be a play.
Troy's not bad. They are a team that people are looking at and hey, they could go. I think their win total is 4.5.
First game could be messy. It also could be, Lane will try and score 80 if he can. Too. So you got to worry about that, But
but they're decent. We'll put it that way. But as always in the SEC, I mean, they got to battle with those middle teams. Well, they're a top 3rd team, but Arkansas.
No days off in SEC, dude.
No.
In that conference, every week's tough. If you're
Auburn, LSU,
if you're not motivated, you're gonna get smashed.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know. You get to the bottom, you have Vanderbilt. I mean, of course, that's easy, but I don't know. Vanderbilt, interesting. I think Vanderbilt. We'll talk about that next weekend, week 0, taking a lot of money. I feel like against Hawaii.
Hawaii's always great week 1, isn't it, or something like that?
Yeah, but they're that program's a disaster.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's kind of hard. It's I don't know. We'll talk about that game next week for sure. But that's an interesting game. It's the last one, of course, the nightcap 10:30 a.m. Eastern. Everyone will be up trying to win all their money back.
Yeah.
But it'll be fun. But so SEC really, no argument here that Alabama, Georgia back. It's Alabama, Georgia, and then it's probably a gap, and then everybody else. And when we let's talk about the college football playoff. The 4 teams that we expect to be in. If we had to predict them now, or if you see some value in the market with some of the teams that could kind of sneak in there, we do agree that Alabama, Georgia will both get in.
I do. In a situation like this, I want to find value where Georgia will get knocked down. I know, part of me says, last year was magical. I was on Georgia from the beginning. You were too. And I rode them to all about Georgia last year. And so don't take this as any, hit against Georgia, but it's still Kirby Smart. And I know he won a national title. I get it. But I just feel like there could be a little bit of a hangover. And if I'm looking at one of those teams we talked about earlier, Kentucky, Florida, the problem is I think the gap's still too large. Even though Georgia lost 30 people in the NFL draft, not say that tongue in cheek, but they lost a lot. I still think the gap is large. So in a season where I thought Georgia might have been able to be caught, I still think they get there. I think they get there pretty easily. And I think they're a tough out for Alabama. But they're going to be the 4th team in the college football playoffs. I think they end up getting there with 2 losses.
Yeah, I definitely too. So how do we see the college football playoffs now? If we had to predict it now, we got Alabama, we got Georgia in there. Who's your other 2 teams?
Yeah, I'll give you my other 2, and after your 2, I'll give you my dark horse. But it is Ohio State for me. There's a lot to be said about what happened with Michigan last season, and it was an awesome run. But I think we kind of figure out pretty quick where they stood in the landscape of giants in college football, and that's pretty far down on the beanstalk. So I think it's Ohio State, and I think they're going to be very motivated this year to really run this thing probably clean. So I got Ohio State, and I got them being the number 1 seed, Alabama 2. And then my 3rd seed, we talked about them last week. I just still think there's plus money on this team. Clemson. I'm going to go Clemson. I get people's reservations about how Dabo's not adjusting to how college football is now played, the free agent market. But in the end, it's them and not really great teams. Miami's the only, I think, real threat probably to take them down. So I'll take Clemson. I just think it's schedule-based. So Clemson is my 3. Georgia's my 4.
Yeah, very good, very good, good stuff. Definitely Clemson. I mean, they're going to be back at the top as long as they don't go crazy and just do what they did last year and just let DJ kind of sabotage the season.
Yeah.
If it's not working early, they got to get them out of there. But yeah, I mean, defensively, they're just monsters, man. And I think they'll be right back in the mix for sure. So love that pick. I'm with you on Ohio State. Listen, I think they're arguably the best team in the country. I think probably best value on the board to win the national championship because I do think it is a 2-team race. I think it's Alabama and it's Ohio State. I think both teams had down years last year and are now and are now back fully loaded. And as crazy as it sounds to say that, that's where we're at in college football, right? Is like, the down year, Alabama still goes to the national championship and might have won if Jameson Williams didn't tear up his knee. But I think they'll be back. They're the top 2 teams. I like Georgia to get in as well. And then my 4th team, I'm going to go with Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma gets a lot of love in the rankings. And I think with Venables there, they have a pretty easy schedule. So I think they'll probably have a slip up during the season, but that's probably about it. So I see them going 11-1. And I think if that's the case, I think that there's some other teams that are going to be up there. I think Michigan has a very soft schedule. So I think we could see Michigan with a very good record at the end of the year. And I think, the NC State you have to worry about, right? If they knock off Clemson, and they win that conference, can they sneak into that college football playoffs? Utah was a team that we talked about, right? If they're able to run the Pac-12, they showed last year they can play with the big boys. So I think they'll get a lot of respect in the rankings. But all in all, if I had to pick the 4, I'm going Bama, Ohio State, Georgia, and then Oklahoma. I think they sneak in.
Yeah, I like it. Oklahoma's good. They and we're going to see quickly, like I said, the game in Nebraska will tell me more about them, and maybe I'll hit them with a live bet for the playoffs at that point. But I do have one dark horse, and if I was going to lean out there, these teams never make it, and I get that. But Cincinnati and the teams outside of the big Power Five never made it until last year. So maybe why not this year when we talk about all the stability up at the top and it's just going to be constant chaos eventually? I'm going to look at the Utah Utes. I think there's value. You can get them plus 450 in a lot of markets. If you get a team out of the Pac-12, let's say they even lose to Florida, but then they run it the rest of the way. I think they're going to have a chance if you get an Oklahoma 2-loss team versus a Utah 1-loss team. I think there's going to be a lot of discussion. And the reason I also say that is because remember last year, if Oklahoma State wins that game, I think they could get in and knock out some of these other
I
teams.
do too.
Yeah.
I do too.
And, there was talk of Notre Dame even late last year. So there's always that talk of those fringe teams. And I think Utah might get a little advantage there, especially if they run the Pac-12 slate, which I think they are actually – have a pretty favorable path based upon some of their home games. So I think
they get Oregon State at home. Oregon State's going to be a tough team this year. They get that game at home. They get USC at home. They have to go to UCLA.
Who cares?
But they got to go to Oregon. But, Oregon could go either way this year. It's going to depend on the quarterback position.
Yeah. So and listen, Utah is ranked 7th overall. So it's not like a huge stretch, but it's a team. If you're getting 450 for someone to sneak in, I think Utah is the one I would, think has good betting value.
I love it because I think if they can get there record-wise, I think that last year they earned respect. And,
yes,
I think by the way they played down the stretch, so I think that can definitely help them. So Pac-12 is going to be so much fun, man. Pac-12 after dark is going to be –
I think it's going to be awesome this year.
It's going to be insane, dude. It's going to be such a fun conference. But I can't wait to get into the games. We get a little taste next week with week 0, and then things really take off the following week with week 1. So we'll be back. I think there's I want to say there's 6 or 7 games on the slate or whatnot. Not sure if we'll hit them all, but we'll get the good ones that can make us some money. So we're going to be dialed in, ready to go in week 0 next week. Dave, thanks for hopping on with us, dude. Lots of fun. Can't wait for the season. Going to be a ton. We'll be back next Saturday. Any parting thoughts for the audience before we get out of here?
Enjoy this little calm in the sea right now
because the storm is coming, man.
It's about
to
sit back, take a little downtime now because it's about to be fun.
Count your money because it's time to roll. We'll be back next week, guys. We appreciate you checking in. We'll see you then.